Hey guys, welcome to the session on Python Django tutorial for beginners by Intellipaat. Django is by far one of the most popular web application development frameworks when it comes to server side, and since it's written in Python, it's also quite easy to pick up as well. The difficulty lies in the number of components that the Django provides, so it can be a little difficult to get started with it. Keeping that in mind, we've come up with this session to help you get started and demystify some of the concepts that might be a little hard to grasp when it comes to Django. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the agenda. But before we begin, we'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel and click on the notification bell icon so that you never miss another update. Also click on the like button if you like the video and comment down below what other technologies would you like for us to cover next. Also, if you have any questions during the entire presentation, put them into the question box and our team is there to help you out with any query you might have. And if any of the technologies or the code that we use seems to be a little jarring and a little difficult to understand, then don't worry, we would guide you through some of the resources at the end of the presentation where you can learn these things. So with that, let's start with the agenda for the session. We'll begin by taking a look at what is Django. Since Django is the foundation of what we're trying to discuss here, we'll begin by understanding what Django is. Then we'll take a look at why you should want to use Django. Although Django is not the only web application development framework available, since there's Python, in Python there's Flask, Web2Py, and many other frameworks are available in other languages as well. Why should you want to use Django? We'll take a look at that. Then we'll move on to take a look at the components of Django. Django has several components. It is a full-fledged batteries included framework, which means that it comes with a lot of things pre-packaged for you. All of these things are tested and integrated in the framework so that you can easily use one with the other. And then we'll move on to a hands-on in Django, in which we'll build a very simple application, but we'll try and demystify all the concepts that we cover in the components of Django. We'll try and understand how the request response lifecycle works and how you can go about setting up a project and building a project in the best way possible according to the current standards. So with that, let us begin by taking a look at what is Django. So what is Django? Django is a backend web application development framework written in Python, which is used to build server-side applications. For instance, if you've ever worked with a web application, you know that on the client side, you are getting the HTML page, but there's also another component of it, which is the server side, which gets the request, parses it, takes out the data that's needed, saves it into the database if necessary, manipulates the response, and then sends it back to you. So whenever you request an HTML page, it is coming from a server, and then from further on, any of the interactions that you make are also going back and forth from the server to the client. So to give you an example, if you have ever worked on any web application or if you ever used any web application that seems dynamic in the sense that you log in with another user account and you get all the different information of that user, and you log in with your user account and you get a different experience. In other sense, it looks like there are separate pages for you and the user. But those pages are not created by developers strictly. What they do is they write code that will create a template, define where the dynamic data needs to go inside the template, and then when the user logs in and requests for that page on the server side technology that we're using, in this case Django, will take that template, take the dynamic data, feed it into the system, and feed it into the template, create an HTML page, and send that as a response, which is the only thing that our browser can understand. So this is how dynamic pages are constructed, and all of this works on Django. Another way of doing this would be to use JavaScript-based application, in which you, on the initial loading of the page, you send the entire JavaScript, and from there on, all the interactions are taken care of by JavaScript. In these cases, you don't need to send the entire HTML page. That is all done by JavaScript on the front end. All you need to do is send some data so that the JavaScript can fill in the blanks of and populate the dynamic data. In these cases, we build something called a web API, but we don't need to get ahead of ourselves in that regard. Now let's take a look at why you should want to use Django. As we've already discussed, that Django is quite popular among the web development community, especially if you know Python, because Python is one of the most popular languages right now. So why would you want to use Django when there are so many options available already for you? So Django is quite popular because of all the features that it comes with and its ease of use. So one of the major advantages that you get when you're using a web application development framework that is as tried and tested as Django is that Django has been around for quite a while. It's in its third version right now. It's very popular and it's very easy to use as well. It has a structure that's quite easily understood, and the language that it uses, Python, is also quite easy to pick up. Django comes with a lot of utilities to make it as easy for you to get started with web application development frameworks as possible. It deals with a lot of components of web application development frameworks, such as parsing HTTP request, sending back an HTTP response, interacting with the database, adding new functionalities, structuring your application, middlewares, and many other kinds of things that you might need to know as you go along. So Django does a lot for you. A lot comes out of the box, including authentication, authorization, admin panels, and many other things. Django is quite popular because of all these features that are available, that are made available to us because of all the things that Django provides. So now let's take a look at the components of Django. Since we have already discussed that Django is so very popular because it gives us a lot of features, it has a lot of components. It's now time to let us take a look at what are the components that Django provides. So Django has multiple components such as HTTP, models, views, templates, and URLs. A quick note, before we begin discussing these things one by one, you must have come across a topic called MVC. MVC stands for Model View Controller. What MVC does is that it allows for us to structure our application in a way that we can keep our models, views, and controllers separate. So in the MVC semantics, model stands for our data and our database queries. View stands for the UI layer or whatever the user views, such as the HTML content. And the controller stands for the middleman that gets the HTTP request, gets the model, gets data out of that model, puts it into the view, or and then sends the dynamic content back to the user. The models and views are never supposed to interact with each other, only through controllers. Now that is fine, but in Django, that's not strictly speaking true. Instead of using the model view controller pattern that other frameworks use, such as Laravel and Ruby on Rails, what Django does is that it uses model view template (MVT). So models are still the same. They interact with the database and get data and put data back into the database quite easily. Views, on the other hand, act as controller. So if you come with the MVC framework, then this is going to be a little jarring for you, because in MVC, views are what are displayed to the users, and here views are what is getting the HTTP request and sending it back to the user. And then there's templates. So a template is what view is in control. It's basically just some HTML content with space left so that it could be populated with dynamic content. So just before we begin, I wanted to clarify that, because if you come with an MVC framework, then it's going to be a little difficult to understand, since views and templates have different meanings in Django than it would in an MVC framework. Now let's understand these one by one. So firstly, we have something called HTTP. HTTP, as we all know, is the foundational protocol that allows us to transmit information from the server side to the client side, or any other application that uses the internet uses HTTP. The way Django uses HTTP is that once it receives an HTTP request on a particular port, it will take a look at the request, build a request object. What that request object does is that it contains information about the request. Where did the request come from? What are the headers in the request? Has the user sent some authorization token with the request? And there are many other aspects of it as well. So that's how HTTP works in Django. Django has a very rock solid HTTP foundation. That way, any problem that you might face regarding any HTTP issues, such as cookie decoding and many other kinds of things, HTTP can take care of that in Django. Then comes models. As we have discussed, models are there so that we can interact with the database efficiently. If we didn't have models, the way we would make our database queries would be to make raw SQL queries if you're using an SQL database. After getting the data from the database, we put them into objects. These objects are basically what represent our data that we want to send back. So to give you an example, if you had, let's say, a user object, You get the user record from the database, all the data such as the username, their password, their date of birth, and any other relevant information you might have stored in there regarding their addresses, phone numbers, or whatever. Then what you do is you take only the bits of data from that object into the from that database result into the object. So maybe you don't want to give back the password when the user requests for some information about other users. You only want to give them the name and their date of birth. So you put it there and then you send it back. Now this is fine, but you have to do it for multiple objects, and this becomes really cumbersome when you have to do it conditionally over a long period of time. The code becomes really messy. On the other hand, Django solves this problem using something called an ORM. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper. It takes data from a relational source, such as a relational database. In our case, it could be an SQL database, and then it automatically puts that data into a object that we have described and returns back the object. We can customize the ORM operations quite easily. Django's ORM is among one of the most powerful ORMs that has been built in Python. It is therefore one of the most popular ones as well. Then comes views. Views, as we have discussed, plays the role of controller. They get the HTTP request, parse it, and orchestrate the entire getting data from the model and putting it into the templates kind of thing. Any kind of logic that you need to perform would be there in controller by default. And from there on, if the controllers start becoming really big, then you try to push that data out of the controllers into other components. So that's how controllers work. And this is what views are. They could be functions, they could be classes, they could be many different kinds. Then comes templates. A template is nothing more than just a placeholder HTML file. What it does is that it allows us to create dynamic content. What Django does is that it has a templating engine called the Django template engine. What that does is that it takes a look at your dynamic data, looks at some special syntax that Django has provided. Using that syntax, figures out where to put the dynamic content and how to generate the entire HTML page. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And after generating that content, return it back to the user. So that's how that works. And finally, URLs. This is what makes the entire application work. So the way URLs works is, suppose that you have an HTTP web application. What that does is that it gets requests from users and sends back some response. Could be anything. But there are certain URLs in your application that you only want to be accessed via the authenticated users, and you only respond to a few requests such as /contact, your domain name /contacts, your domain name /users, and your domain name /about us. That's about it. So any other request that you get, you need to either show them a 404 page, meaning that this URL does not exist on this domain, or something like this. The URLs aspect of Django is where this is solved. So you can register all the URLs that you respond to, and then if nothing works, then show the user this template. And that's basically it. These are the most important fundamental concepts in Django. Of course, there are many other components of Django as well, such as authentication, data validation, middlewares, apps, and many other kinds of things. And we'll take a look at few of those. But the important point to understand here is that when we have all of these components understood, that means we have understood the basics of Django. And once we have understood the basics of Django, we can build simple applications and we can learn more about it. With that, with understanding the basics, let's now take a look at a hands-on. Alright guys, now let's take a look at a hands-on using Django in Python. In this hands-on, we'll build a very simple Django application that will work and will try and serve HTTP requests and all of that. We won't be using modules because that will require us to set up a database, and that's not really relevant in this session. So with that, let's take a look at what we have. So I have an empty directory. I have opened up my command prompt here. Before we begin, I'd like you to install pipenv. So if you want to install pipenv, make sure firstly that Python is installed. You can do this by checking. I have the Python version 3.8.3, and then you can also take a look at the version of pip you have installed. Pip is the version or the package manager in Python. So we have both of those installed. Now, if I want to install pipenv, I have to type in pip install pipenv. I'll press enter, but I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do that. Pipenv allows us to use different versions of packages on our system. So if you want to install Django 3.1 for one project and Django 2.7 for another project, and don't want it to affect any other kinds of installations of Django, you can do that here. So with that, I have typed pip env shell. I'll press enter. This will start up a pip env shell for me. This will work in a few moments, won't take a lot of time, and it has created a pip env shell for me and has already started the session. Now, before we begin, it's completely optional for you to do this. If you don't want to do this, it's completely fine. I would still recommend that you do it, because this will make sure that if you already have some version of Django installed on your system, you can still work with the latest version and have that version installed. So it's completely up to you. After installing this, I'm using pip env install Django. Press enter. This will take a little bit of a time in order to get everything from the pip env website and install it here on Django. It shouldn't take too much time, but depending on your internet speed and connection, it will work. So it installed everything. Now it's creating the pip lock file that will contain the list of dependencies that we have. This will also work in a moment. And now it's locking the file, which means all the dependencies were successfully installed. Now we just need to list them inside a file that can be transferred. And now I'm using Visual Studio Code inside my directory. Here, now that I have created, just open it up. Yeah, everything's done. So we have created our Visual Studio Code session and everything that we needed to do. Now let's start by creating a Django project. Creating a Django project is quite easy. All you have to do is, after installing Django, you have access to a command named Django admin, and you can type start project demo project. Press enter. This works. If I were to take a look at the Visual Studio Code, you can see a new folder is created for me, demo project. It has a manage.py file in its root and another folder named the same demo project. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But first, let me just cd into manage.demo.py. Demo project is a folder in which we have created everything. So now, if I want to run the project, I want to type the command python manage.py run server, press enter. This will start a local HTTP server that is running our Django application on localhost port 8000. As you can see, this is the URL. You can either call it localhost or use the entire URL address 127.0.0.1. I'll use localhost 8000, press enter. This is what the default page looks like, and we have no URLs configured, so that's why it looks like this. Now, before we begin, let me just create an app and show you what an app and project looks like. So in Django, the way you create applications is by firstly creating a project, and then small slices of functionalities should be divided into apps. So if you want to create a e-commerce application in which the vendors can put the things that they want to sell and users can buy from the vendors, then you need to create two separate sites for this. You can create one side for the customer facing view. So when the customer logs in, they can take a look at all the products listed by a vendor, buy that product, and then the request is sent to your servers. On the other hand, on servers, on the customer, after the customer side, there's the vendor site in which you can have a vendor login, look at what the products that they can list, then list those products and click submit, and those products will then be displayed to the user. These are complete different applications, but they're part of the same project. So that's what project and application means. Now to start an app inside a project, all I need to do is use the python manage.py command, start app, demo app, press enter. This will create a directory structure in which we have a few files. All of this is generated for us. So if I go here, these are all the files. Take a look at apps.py. This tells us the application name that we have created. It's demo app. Now I want my project to know that I have created a new application. So I have to go here in the settings.py file, type in demo app. And as you can see that we have our demo app here. I can save it. This works. Now I want to make sure that my Visual Studio Code extension knows that I'm using the Django hands-on folder. So I'll just do this. Now this works. Everything is there. Now my folder knows that I have created a new app. Anything that I add into my app can be included in my project. So now let's create our first HTTP rule. So to do that, first thing I have to do is go to views. I'll create an index view. This is the controller. It can be a class, it could be a function, could be anything. And I want to return an HTTP response that says hello Django app. To use this, I'll just keep it here and I'll use URLs, no, HTTP res response. So this is done. Now I want to create a urls.py file inside my demo app. urls.py. So from Django.urls import path, and now I have to create a list of URLs. So URL patterns patterns, and here I have to use the path variable. I want it to be an empty path, which means the root URL. In our case, it's our domain localhost colon 8000. I want to show views dot index, and I need to import views from dot import views. Dot means the current directory, and finally I can give it a name, index. This is done. Now inside my urls.py file, all I can do is, without using this, I include. This means that for all the URLs that start with slash, forward those URLs to, and I'll use the include, inside our demo app into our urls.py file. Let's save this, and if I run the server, python manage.py, run server, press enter, this should start in a few seconds. It checks up everything, everything's fine. Go back, and if I refresh this page now, it should show me hello Django app. So this is fine, this works really well, but an issue that we come across in situations like this is that it is really simplistic. We are not serving any HTML content, nothing that our browser can understand. It's just a string. So now let's try and build some templates. Now building a template is not going to be that difficult. So I will make the changes. So I'll go to views. Now I don't need the HTTP response. I'm using the render function here. Now the render function is going to take in a few arguments. So it's going to take in the request, the name of the template, and some dynamic data that will be passed into our template. So for that, firstly, I'll pass in the request object. Then the name of the template here is going to be index, but you can name it anything that you want. And we also need the extension, which is HTML. And then I'll pass in some data. Now, instead of getting data from the database and then populating it with his, I'm going to create names. Let's say these are the name of your friends, John, Jane, and John. All I need to do now is pass in the names in a dictionary with the key of names. This will be available in our templates. Now I have to create templates. Since we have included our project here and the app inside project, I can just create a directory inside my app called templates. And inside the templates, I will create firstly a base.html file. I'll show you what that does in a moment. So I'll just create some scaffolding, which is demo app. And what I want now is for this app to work. So for this app to work, we have to make we have to create an entire HTML page. So for that, all I will have to do is, the first thing I have to do here is I have to create some blocks. These blocks define the dynamic content that I want things to be populated into. So for that, I have to create, for the app, I have to create the base.html. This will be extended by other templates. All I have to do is use this special Django syntax. This is available strictly in Django, so this is not an HTML tag. I'll define a block. I'll call it content, and here I'll end the block. I could add some more content here, but this is fine. So demo, or I can just end block. So we started a block. Now we have ended a block. This is very much like starting an if statement and ending an if statement. You can put these two in the new line as well. Now I'll create a new file. I'll call it index.html. And now here is where the entire Django's template engine comes into play. I'll put something at the top. It's called extends, and I'm telling it to extend the base.html. What this says is that before you begin, import everything that is inside base.html, and inside the block that is named content, what I want to put is, and I'll just put it here, and here you have to just type and block, and now this is where you can use your Python codes. I'll create an unordered list. Inside that list, what I want to do is I want to use a for statement, for loop. So for name in names. This is basically how Python works. Now I have to create an list item, and inside it, all I want to do is type in the name. So this is done. Now I can just end for. So I'm saying, okay, this is the for loop that I want to use, and now the for loop ends. So for all the names inside the name, type them out inside a list item. It takes a look at this, takes a look at the base HTML, figures out this is what the user wants, and this content needs to be replaced by everything that's inside this. Now, why did we do this? The reason why is because if I want to create multiple HTML pages, what now is going to happen is those pages are going to have the same style and the same structure, because this is going to be where I will define my styles and the same title, and then that could be taken care of. The specifics of the content can be taken care of by this code. So this is done. I have created the render path as well. If I have saved everything and no errors are being shown here, so that's good. If I go back, hopefully everything will work. So I press enter. I think it shows me some error, and Django is good enough to let us know that there is some syntax error. So it says that for statements should be used in the format for x in y, for name in names. So we have this, and inside the template, what mistake we have made is, let's take a look at this. I have used the is keyword instead of in. This is the problem that we get. So I save this, go back and refresh. Now we have another issue, and it says it's looking for end block. Oh yeah, so it's not able to find it because these things need to be done this way. So the compiler gets tricked up a little bit. Now it's done. So as you can see, our data is dynamically being generated by the data that we have passed in. So just to recap, the way this has worked is we created a project, we created an app, we included the project inside included the app inside the project using demo app. Now we created a URL file inside which we define the URLs that we want to respond to. It's going to be our base URL. We gave it a name of index. Inside our views, we created an index view. What we are asking it to do is render the HTML content with the dynamic content that we have created ourselves. It takes a look at the base HTML, it takes a look at the index HTML, takes a look at the base HTML that it wants to extend, finds out the appropriate blocks, fills those blocks with the new content that is created, and then we get all the HTML content sent back to us. So with that, we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we leave, I'd like to show you a few things. An investment in knowledge always pays. The best interest is the quote that always helps me when I'm learning new things. With that in mind, if you ever come across any issues regarding any of the technologies that you're using and you want those doubts to be solved, you can put your questions on our community site, intellipaat.com/community. Like-minded users such as you and your peers, and some even talented developers are there. They can help you out with any queries that you have. We also have our blogging site, intellipaat.com/blogs. You can check it out if you want to learn something new about the technology. We publish content regularly regarding careers, interview questions, new technologies, and many other different domains. Then you can take a look at our YouTube channel, where we have posted a lot of free content regarding a lot of courses. You can take a look at the free courses that are available on our YouTube channel in order to learn more about a specific technology. But if you wish to get certified to get ahead in your career, what I would recommend is you can take a look at our Python Django course that's on our website, intellipaat.com. This is a certification course that will be 32 hours instructor-led training or 64 hours self-paced videos, however which one you wish to use. 24/7 lifetime support and certification and job assistance. You can take a look at the career transitions. You can take a look at the course ratings. It is one of our highest rated courses. You can take a look at the overview of the course. You can take a look at the things that we'll cover. So we'll start from scratch completely, show you the basics of Python. Then we'll take a look at the function sequence operations. We'll take a look at Django, dynamic pages, parsing HTML and JSON, XML, different kinds of things that are going to be important for us. Then we'll create a Python Django project, learn how to do that, and then we will help you build the Python projects yourself. So after you've done with the certification, you have something to show on your resume, and then you'll get this certification. This is a certification that is valid in several multinational corporations such as Music, Cognizant, Sony, Saint Gobain, etc. You can take a look at the testimonials, you can take a look at the reviews, and if you have any questions, maybe the questions are answered in the FAQ. In case they are not, let me guide you through a resource that can help you out here. So before that, thank you so much for joining us. YouTube 30 is a coupon code especially for our YouTube viewers. You can get any course from our website using YouTube 30 and get a 30% off. This is a coupon code that is available for a limited period of time. So we hope you will take advantage of this as quickly as possible. So with that, we have come to the end of the session. In case you want any other assistance, and if you have a question that was not answered in the FAQ section, you can contact us on the numbers listed on the screen. You can also send us an email listed on the screen, and we will contact you as soon as possible. Our course advisors are there to help you out 24/7 regarding your career transitions and learning new skills. With that, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.